There are some old sayings: buy once, cry once, do it right the first time. And I elected to put drum brakes on the rear end when I replaced it because they are more than sufficient for the weight of the car, and they are. What I didn't anticipate was that they would give me drum brakes that were newly manufactured, clearly out of China, and I've battled the hell out of them. I've replaced pretty much every part inside the drum brakes, and they're not. They drag. They seem to delay release. I've changed the master cylinder proportioning valve. The only thing that I can come up with is that dimensionally the backing plates are probably incorrect. I found a lot of problems with them. They are right there. A bunch of parts. The arc of those shoes is wrong, and I thought, well, that's going to solve it. And I put Bosch shoes on it that had the correct arc, and it still isn't right. And now the problem is the drums have been heated up so many times that they're warped to the point where I think even turning them would be difficult because they've probably got hard spots in them. They've turned blue. Because it won't do it when I'm driving around town. It seems to do it after some use, and I know it's not holding pressure. I've checked that. So anyways, long drawn out troubleshooting for that. I did what I should have done in the first place. Got Wilwood for it. I called up Quick Performance because they stock it and they'll drill it for me, and they did. So they buy the Curry kit, which is normally, I think, for Curry rear ends. But all that means is it comes with blank rotors. So when I say blank rotors, I'm talking about ones that don't have any holes drilled in them, which is what we need for the 4x4.5 lug pattern. So I should have done this in the first place. And I always tell people, buy once, cry once, and here we go. So now I've got a bunch tied up in these stupid drum brakes that are no good. So, and I couldn't replace the drums that are on it easily because they have to buy blank drums and drill them because they're 4x4.5. Otherwise, I probably would have thrown another set of drums at it. I gave up. It's just this is going to work great. This is the 12.19 kit. It's arguably, not even arguably, it's absolutely way more brake than this needs. But it's going to be reliable. Wilwood here in California, great folks over there. They make good stuff. And it's all made right here in California. Let me do a little edumacation on what's going on here too. So it is a complete kit. When I said it's the Curry kit, it's got the blank rotors, like I mentioned, and Quick Performance did the drilling on them for me. They have these kits in stock, and then they custom drill them for whatever pattern they need if it's not a standard pattern, which mine isn't. So here we are. We're drilled for 4x4.5. That's perfect. Do not need to change the studs. I confirmed that with them. This is what was it, 30 thousandths thicker, I think, than the drums. So that's no problem there. 30 thousandths of an inch ain't gonna break the bank. That's 32nd of an inch or so. Here are the calipers, right here. Black to match the front black Wilwood. If you'll remember from years ago, one of the first videos I did on this car was disc brakes. Actually, I think it was the first video. We got pads. And then we have the adapter, the rotor registration ring adapters. Now, the way these rotors work, they're drilled like 3.15, I want to say. And you have to get a registration adapter that fits. Now, I was anticipating they would give me 2.804s because they can range from 2.6, I think, to 2.9 or something. I forget what the range of these are. This sits inside of the center of the rotor right here. Sits inside of there. And this adapts it to the 2.77 that is on the car, on the axles. Now, 2.77 is the radius is before the radius, so there's a little bit of a radius where it comes up, and it turns out to be about 2.8 or so. So these will adapt correctly to the axles, and they gave them to me, so clearly it's going to fit the Quick Performance 2.77s. I did purchase the units with the parking brake. I spent a lot of time researching this, and I think I'm going to be able to use the original parking brake. So the the original parking brake cable. I think it will fit. That looks about like a 1/2 inch hole, so that should work okay. I'm going to have to cut the swedges off the end though, so the end of the cable is swedged. This takes a special clevis. Let me show you that. I did have to buy these separately. I got them from Summit. I stumbled across these. I knew that it needed the clevises, and I was trying to find something that I could swedge on the end, and then I found out that Wilwood actually makes a kit for it. So I think I was looking at their catalog or something, and I found these. So this clevis hooks on here, and that will pull this lever to engage the drum parking brake, and then it comes with cable ends right there that have a set screw. So, and it, I couldn't find out what the diameter of these was, but it looks to me like the parking brake cable will fit in there. I'm not sure what that diameter is, if it's 3/16 or something, 1/8 inch parking brake cable. I'm not sure, but it looks to me like it will fit. So yeah, you put it through the end of that clevis pin there, and then you put that on the end and set the set screw, and that should give us some parking brakes. The other question was whether the cable would snap into the ends here, and it looks to me, I want to say it's about a 1/2 inch hole that's in the backing plate right now, so I should be able to get it in here. If not, I can always make a custom mount for this. And this is where the caliper mounts. So you mount this onto the axle. This is for the big Ford Torino pattern. That's what they use, they being quick performance. And here's the bearing retainer, and I believe it goes, there's a lip right here you can see. I believe that lip goes in to keep the bearing retained that way. That's very important. If you put that backwards, the axle's going to want to walk out. The way that bearing sits in the axle housing, it's just proud of the axle housing, probably by a 1/16 of an inch. And because this backing plate's going to be on here and it's relatively thick, the bearing is going to be recessed some. So that's why you need this plate to sit inside of there to push that, retain that bearing. So let's see, it sits down in there like that. So anyways, yeah, it's got the your typical kind of almost like Explorer parking brakes. And lastly, this is why you do your research. Wilwood's, you go on their website and you look up these kits, it tells you every part number that comes in the kit. I did not see the adapters for it. Most of their calipers are 1/8 27 NPT, so pipe thread. And I checked, and the hoses that I have on the rear, which I have steel braided on there, so it's PTFE steel braided line. They're -4. Typically, Wilwood has -3 on them, but because it's a shared line in the rear, it's -4. If it was in the front, like on this, it's got -3 on either side. It's got independent lines for the front, but the rear, like on most cars, you have a single line going to the rear. And in the Mustangs, it's 3/16 line for some stupid reason. I'm sure that they save 10 cents on steel. GM always used 1/4 inch going from the front to the back. So I don't think that's going to be a problem here, because you always want your rear bias to be less than the front anyways. So the proportioning valve is going to regulate that flow below what I need anyhow. All right, so here's what we got here. It's nice and loose, although this is the driver's side. This is what the passenger side would be like if I took it apart. It would be fine too, but for some reason it's hanging up. Now, I'm going to explain something here. I don't know if the light's going to show it or not. See the blue all the way through the drum? This drum is junk. Sure, you might be able to turn it. They'd have a hell of a time turning it, though, because that's all hardened now. It's hardened from overheating it too many times, and I didn't intentionally overheat it too many times. I was troubleshooting it, and I get back here from a drive, and it would be a zillion degrees. Not so much on this side, and ever since I've changed the shoes and stuff, it's not so bad. On the driver's side. The driver's side, I think, is probably normal now, but I think the passenger side is just really warped, and it was always running hotter. This drum, if you try and turn it, it's just, I think it's just too far gone. These are custom drums. They're from a 77 Bronco. You have to find the blank ones, which quick performance can get me, but I'm just over it. I should have done it right in the first place. I always say that, and I didn't follow my own rules. So anyways, very straightforward here. We'll remove the brake line. We'll remove the e-brake cable from right here. Been looking at it. I think I can use a e-brake cable. And I want to check this too, the registration hub on here. These are 277, 2.77. These are 2804, but it's what they gave me from Quick Performance, and they only make this axle, I think, unless you ask for something custom. So I'm going to test the rotor out on here and see how it fits. I'm just going to take the brake assembly off. It's super easy. If I unbolt that and take the e-brake cable out, I have to unlatch it here from the parking brake arm. You just take those 4 bolts out, and this whole thing just slides off of here. Now we do have to take the axle out in order to get this off, because obviously the axle flange is in the way. It's not really horrible. I am working in the garage though, and make sure you leave yourself enough room. I know better. I got the truck right here, but I think I have enough room to slide this axle out. I think this is the short side too. All right, this is the registration adapter. And as I suspected, that's awfully loose. I don't know that I like that. We'll see what it's like with the studs, but they make a 2.78 adapter, and I may put the 2.78 adapter on here. This just seems too loose to me. I can buy the 2.78s. I'm curious. I may call them on Monday. Oh, they're closed. Monday's a holiday, but this is a 11337. If a camera would focus. Yeah, 11337. So I think the manual from Wilwood actually shows the different part numbers. I can look them up, and if I'm lucky, I can get them here this weekend. And there you have it. It's in the Wilwood manual, of course. So supplied with kit, 300-11337. And we want to try 311-532, I think might be more appropriate. We'll see if it's too tight or not, but I don't like how loose that is on there. That much run out. Now, it may, between the studs, maybe it needs that much play with the studs. So we'll try it with the studs on there, because if there's enough play in the studs, it may center on its own, or it could be offset. Now, as long as it's offset by, if it's offset by 20 thousandths in one direction, I don't think that's going to make a huge difference. But if it's constantly moving around, that would be bad. I guess it won't, because the wheel will have it clamped down. I still don't like it. The engineer in me says the 2.78 is probably better. Let me see if I can get those. A little Go Country Gold on the old Zenith transistor. So, got it out. It needed a little percussive maintenance to get it out. You don't have a slide hammer. Sometimes these bearings can get in there pretty good, and I think part of it was I had used aviation formagasket in here when I installed it, and I think that was sticking it up a little bit, so I had to hit it with the slide hammer, but it's out. You can see my shim in here. This is the pinion shim. Anyways, super easy, here's the brake hose. I want to get this hooked up quick because it will drain back out of the master. So, we got to get that going. Anyways, I just take it out, whole assembly. Slides out of the way. We shouldn't need to do anything with this. Just check the bearing. That's all nice and smooth. No issues there. That should just slide back in here. I'll clean this up a little bit. I'm going to check this seal, make sure I didn't lose the spring in here, make sure I didn't damage it taking it out, because that could kind of be a bummer if I did. But so far it looks okay. So we'll just do a quick inspection on that, and then we'll start the assembly of the Wilwood kit. Alright, so all I've done here is just put the left-hand side unit on. It's stamped L on this bracket. Obviously, We would want the bracket here because that's where the parking brake cable's got to go, and the caliper goes here. It goes in the back. Nice thing is it's mounted vertically. When you bleed these calipers, the Wilwood calipers, they have 2 bleeder valves on it. You do not open the bottom one. You only open the top one. And if it's at an angle, you have to remove it to bleed it. It's got to be facing up, otherwise you'll never get all the air out of it. Okay, so anyways, this sits on here. You know, you got to battle these T-bolts because they're not welded in or anything like that, which is a good thing because replaceable, but it's a little bit of a pain because they'll want to fall out. But we got to do that. We got to put this bearing retainer in there after we put the axle in. Okay, so we got to slip that up in there and bolt it with this lip pointing in because this is thicker. So the bearing is just proud of this lip, and we want it keeping it fully retained. All right, we got it in there. Of course, the bearing's a little tight going back in too, so I had to use my jeweler's hammer to get it back in. But it's in, and now the space is really tight. I could take this apart, but I'm lazy. It'd be easier if the shoes weren't here, but I really don't want to disassemble that. So anyways, getting down into those is a little bit, as you can see, down in there, that bolt. A little hard to get to, but I can do it, and I can kind of get to it through these holes here. I just got to get the washers on there. Get it torqued down. Those are 3/8 24, I think. So what, 35 foot-pounds? Let's check. All right, let's show you a little trick here. Sorry for the shaky cam. Here's the bolt. Here's my washer. Just take our flat blade screwdriver here. There. So when you can't get to it, you know, you just use your brain a little bit, right? And then I got my shallow socket here with the nut already in it to get it started. See? Just tricks you pick up over time. I know you probably can't really see that, but anyways. All right, let's figure out what the torque is, like I said. All right, my guess was off. It's 26, so 26. As if you guys need me to show you how to torque a bolt. I don't know, maybe you do. Don't yank. Let me get these cinched up a little bit. Hang on. Might have gotten a little happy with the impact, so we'll see. Nope. And unfortunately, it kind of needs an extension, but I'd rather have it shorter because it's more accurate. All right, that's one. Let's see, this is going to get interesting depending on where we are, huh? So you can use an extension. If you look it up online, there are charts. I believe there's charts or information at least that tells you how to account for that, because the extension will twist and it's going to give you a false torque value. So I guess I didn't cinch this one up cinch this one up enough, and I'm getting one click. Probably cheat a little bit here. There we go. This is the reason you don't rattle these things on with an impact. You get into what's called yield. If you're not familiar, hardware will permanently stretch. That's called the yield point. And we don't want to do that. That's why you always torque your lug nuts, because your impact wrench will put out 400 foot-pounds when you really want 90 on a half-inch stud. And not that it'll break, because the bolts are meant to stretch, but it will permanently damage them. And if you do it repeated times, you could end up with one that breaks. That's why if you look at hoopty cars for sale on the line, sometimes you see they're missing lug nuts. And it's from people rattling them on. Also, good news, the e-brake cable will work. This bracket's thicker, so the fingers that bend out here that capture it, I'm probably gonna have to cut those or bend them, but it will work. And we just need a couple of those to grab. And then this is plenty long. We're gonna cut this end off right here. We'll just use the cable cutters. We'll cut it. Probably shorten the spring a little bit. I'm gonna shorten the spring probably a bit. If I can keep the spring. I may not need to with this. We'll look at the spring. We'll see if we want to keep that or not. But that does help the e-brake cable to return. So we'll have to take a look at that. Okay, test fitting up the rotor here, and I don't like that. I think that could be better, and I'm gonna wait and get the correct. I'm gonna wait and get the correct registration adapters. Unfortunately, I can't get them until the middle of next week, it looks like, because there's just nowhere that I can get them right now, which is really unfortunate. If I'd have known, I could have ordered them last week, and I didn't know. This may be okay. I personally don't like it. You know, to me, it's going to have a little bit of runout in it. And that, it may be okay. I personally don't like it, though. See that? Look right in here. So that's a Summit order, and it won't ship until Tuesday. Okay, so put Teflon tape on here. This is how Wilwood tells you to do it. These are NPT, 1/8" NPT. And you want to make sure that you wrap that Teflon tape. Everybody should know that. Come on. You want to make sure you wrap it in the direction that it's going to be tightening. That way it doesn't unravel when you screw it in. Now what they tell you to do, double check this in the instructions, but as I recall, they tell you make it finger tight. These are classically over tightened. Okay, as I'm sitting here fiddling around trying to get it in and not having it in frame. I need two hands. Okay, so what they tell you with this is to make it hand tight as far as you can get it in by hand. I'm going to need two hands. And then they tell you to go 1.5 to 2 turns further. That way you don't over tighten it. You don't want to over tighten it, you'll break it. It doesn't have to be that tight. And if it leaks, you can always take it apart and reseal it. So you probably know this if you've ever researched most of what Wilwood does. They do have floating calipers, but these are non-floating, as are most of their calipers. That means that it's got to be shimmed to center. Now, I'm not putting the rotor on it right now. I need to get it. I got to get it in here because I'm losing brake fluid, so I got to get it sealed up. So you take the bolts. Kit comes with the correct bolts. Okay. They tell you to start out with 2 35,000 shims. Now that shim's going to go in between here, okay? On either one. You want these to be equal. You don't ever want 3 and 2 or 1 and 2 or any other combo. It's always 2 and 2, 3 and 3, so on and so forth, 1 and 1. And we'll do that once I get the parts to do this correctly. Like I said, I just don't like the way this axis registration sits on here. I want the tighter ones. So anyways, we got the connection there. I bought the straight connectors for it. I think I mentioned that already because it's just going to come straight from my AN lines that I already have. You put the washer on the bolt, put the bolt through, okay. I think I probably covered this when I did the front brakes. That was a long time ago, probably 4 years ago. Just like that. Okay, now obviously, like I said, I'm not fully assembling. I'm just going to get the caliper up here so I can hook up my line. Okay, so it looks a little bit funny like this because obviously the rotor's not on here. But I did hook up the line back here. Not sure if you can see that or not. There it is. AN fitting, so hand tight and then 1/4 of a turn. That's all they need to seal. The next thing that they also tell you is very specific here, and it's important because you don't want to hit the rotor. This bolt should just be proud of this boss. Okay? That's really important. You don't want it recessed. They're very explicit about that. I think that's probably thread engagement and how it torques this insert that's in here. And obviously you don't want it too far because it'll hit the rotor. So we'll check the centering. We may have to add 35 thousandths. We have to subtract, but that seems to be the tolerance, about 35 thousandths. So we'll check all that later. I don't want to check that now because that could change by changing these registration rings. Okay, so here's what I did with the e-brake cable. I took a pair of diagonal cutters and nipped these off right here, just about 1/8 of an inch, because this is about 1/8 of an inch thicker, and that should get us to where we snap in. A couple of notes. We're going to have to make a couple modifications here. The cable needs to be shortened. I'm taking a look at this. The hole is not large enough in the clevis, which sits on here. So we're going to have to make a modification there. We'll shorten this cable up to about here. And I cut it with my cable cutters, and it didn't do it very clean, and it bird caged a little bit. So I'm going to actually, when I cut it back, I'm going to use the Dremel to do that. And the benefit of the spring is looking like I'm not going to need it. This has got a ton of spring pressure on it here, so we're going to assemble it without the spring. I can always add it if I need to. But yeah, I'll use a cutoff wheel and the Dremel. That'll keep us from bird caging this out. Okay, so for the e-brake cable stuff, or parking brake cable, whatever you want to call it, I had to drill these out to 0.166. The cable is 0.160, so just enough to get it in there. And that seems like that's going to work pretty well. That worked quite well. So no spring. There's a lot of spring tension here. We'll see if it's a problem for return, and I can add a spring pretty easily if needed. But yeah, just drilling those out and shortening that cable. I used my cable cutters. I ended up using my big cable cutters. You could use a Dremel. You want something that's going to make it so the cable doesn't bird cage, like I mentioned, because if that happens, the cable unravels and then you're kind of stuck. So we got that. I'm just waiting for the adapters right now. The 2/7/8 look like it's going to be within enough tolerance, I think. But I did, like I said, I ordered some 2/7/2s, I think, if I didn't mention that before. And I will turn it, I will turn them to 2/7/7/4, give it 4 thousandths clearance, because the 2/7/8s are 2/7/8/4 from Wilwood, so obviously they want to give it 4 thousandths clearance. We're going to be at 14. Actually, I measured this is 2/7/7/1, so we're going to be at 13 thousandths. That seems excessive to me, but it might be okay. Just knocking out the passenger side here. Went much faster, of course, because all the tools are already out. One note here, I don't remember if I mentioned it on the other side. Since I've got the cables loose, I'm lubing up the sheaths with a little bit of Lockies. It's graphite lubricant. The accelerant in it dries out, and it leaves graphite, which is good to lubricate cables. You want some kind of dry lube in there. So just to, since I got it here and I can get to it, so just shooting it down there. And right now, once I get the e-brake cable hooked up here, I really kind of in a holding pattern. In order to get everything, I can't really put the caliper on it. I may set the caliper up on here just so I can gravity bleed it. I already gravity bled the other side just to get the most air out of it possible before I bleed it. Pressure bleed it. So I can't really do much else, but we'll at least get this cable set up. I think I showed this before, but maybe this is a better angle. Bolt washer. They tell you to start with 2 shims, okay? And I know I covered, how far the bolt comes out here. You want it just proud slightly or flush, but not too low. You definitely don't want it recessed at all, and you don't want it out too far. But I think when I did the front, I think I put 2 shims on it to start, like they said, and it was perfectly centered. And we'll show you how to measure that as soon as I get the rotors on it. Let's do a little extra credit here. I put the indicator on it. I put it on the leaf spring, which is probably not the best place to put it, although it's pretty close to where the U-bolts are at. Let's see what the runout, the radial runout. This is radial, not lateral runout. We can check that too, but we're going to look at the radial runout of the axle to see where it's at. It should be just a few thousandths, I would think. And it is. It's exactly what it should be. It's within 2 thousandths, looks like, all the way around. The problem that we're going to run into with the adapters that I got is that that's going to turn into 10 thousandths, maybe more. I'm going to probably have to make my own, which is going to suck. I can turn them. I got a small lathe here. I can probably cut my own to 2774, but we'll see. Let's see what the two 7/8 are like. I'm going to double check the dimension on the axles here. I think last I checked was 2771. I'm using a dial caliper, which is the wrong way to do that. I really should mic it, but I don't have a 2-inch mic. Yeah, so we're coming right into 2771. So we're going to be 13 thousandths run out. Radial run out. That's not good. It might be okay. We could drive it like that and see. It being out 10 thousandths probably isn't going to hurt anything. But it may cause a balance problem, believe it or not. So I don't know why Wilwood doesn't make a 277 adapter, because 277 is common. There's many sizes, and 277 is one of them. So this is why we can't use the 280 hub adapters, just to overly express this problem. This is with the 280 adapter on it. So that translates out here to about 27 thousandths, 28 thousandths run out. Excuse me. 28 thousandths run out. Yeah, that makes sense. So let's think about this for a second. If you're offset 10 thousandths, you're offset 10 thousandths. It's not any more than that. If it was lateral, if it was like tilted, it's not though. The whole thing is shifted. It's shifted. Right now, it's shifted 30 thousandths. So, right, 77 to 80. It's shifted 30 thousandths or so. So it's not quite as bad as it. It's not quite as bad, and that has to do with this being 771, and it's probably, I haven't checked the ring yet, but the ring might be off by 1,000th or so. So that would make sense. But here we are. You get 30 thousandths run out. That's totally unacceptable. I wish they would have thought about this at Quick Performance. I think what happened was, I think they normally just supply the standard pre-drilled ones. These are 0.6 drilled, and this is, it's half inch, so it's 0.5. So it's 100 thousandths difference. And I think that they're stud centered, would be my guess. This obviously isn't, because they drilled it, they oversized it. If they'd have drilled it half inch, I might not have even needed to do anything, because it probably would have been stud centered, although it might have been off a little bit because the studs are not quite with the threads. Remember, you're not quite a half an inch. You're probably off by 5 to 8 thousandths smaller. So, that probably would have worked, but, so we'll see. We're going to check it with the 78 adapter. In theory, it should have about 10 thousandths run out. I think I could probably live with 10 thousandths run out, but definitely not with close to 30 thousandths. That's just no good, which this perfectly translates to where the gap is right here. These are the wrong adapters. So I'm going to call Quick Performance. I'm going to flag this problem to them, and just to advise them. I don't really care. These adapters are $10. It isn't a big deal. I'm sure they probably didn't know, but I am going to call them. I'm going to tell them, it's off. We'll see what they say. They may say, oh yeah, 30 thousandths run out isn't a problem. I would disagree. That would be a little bit much. I really do think that might throw the balance off, because that's like putting an eccentric on the end of this. You don't want that. That's going to cause a vibration. These are the 278 adapters, and it says we're still 20 thousandth out, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me if I've only got a 14 thousandths gap, but that could be, I'm not sure what that is, honestly. But either way, it's still concentric. It's not even all the way around. It has radial runout. I don't know how big of a deal that's going to be going down the road, but I suspect it's not good. So you can see right there, that's where your gap is, and that's, of course, where the largest gap is where we're going to read 20 thousandths, because duh. So I'm going to have to, I ordered some 272s, I believe. And I'm a little bit concerned because of the chamfer. So this one's the 280, but they've got such a big chamfer on here. If I machine that on a 272, well, it should still be okay. There's a lot of chamfer there. That's just going to get wider. So, we'll take a look at it. I did order some 2s as well, because these things are really cheap. For a Wilwood part, it's probably the cheapest that there is. The 272s, I should be able to machine them. Unfortunately, my lathe will not fit these. It's just slightly too big around to fit on my lathe. I've got a little benchtop deal. So I'm going to have to find a machine shop and have it turned, have a 272 turned 2774 is what it should be. So I just loosened this up and reseated it. And it might be because of where the lettering is on here. I'm not sure. I'm getting about what I would expect, about 11 thousandths. That makes a little bit more sense. I wonder if the rotor's not. I can't imagine that, though. These are Wilwood rotors. These things are going to be within 1,000th easily. So I'm not sure why I was getting 20 thousandths before. Maybe I didn't have the rotor all the way on there. I did tighten these down a little bit with a wrench. The temp nuts that I put on here just to see. I've rambled on about this subject way too long. I'm going to put it back together like this and bleed the brakes. I'm not going to put Loctite on the bolts yet. If I didn't mention that before, these get Loctite 271. I am not going to do that because I'm going to have to take it apart. The caliper has to come off. So for the meantime, I do want to get it on there, get the brakes bled. At least it'll be movable and drivable like that. And I'll wait for the parts to come this week, and then I need to find a machine shop. I know some folks, so maybe I can find a shop that can turn them. Just checking the dimension here. It's 0.553 and 0.551. I'd say that's pretty darn close. So that's, as they suggest, 2 shims, and it's always even, like I mentioned before, 2 shims, 2 shims. So that's perfect. No need to do anything special there. Let me slip the pads in. Okay, here are the rings. These started out as 252, I think. So 0.502, I think, is what these are, or were. They won't fit on my lathe, so a buddy of mine, John, has got a machine shop, and he was gracious enough to turn these for me. He actually made a jig that would hold this. They are cast. These are cast aluminum, we found out, which is interesting. I'm assuming that they're cast aluminum because Wilwood cast a lot of aluminum. All of their calipers are all cast, so I guess apparently they cast these. They start out as a 2-inch diameter, actually. Actually, let me show you. I got a couple of the 2-inch ones just in case. And you can see the casting. See the holes where they did the casting. This one is unmachined other than the outside. So they machine it, and they basically tell you, you buy the 2-inch and you can turn it into anything you want. So this is what they start out as, and then they turn them from there. So anyways, but we did take, the ones that I could get the fastest were 250. So we turned 250 to 2772. So these should fit perfectly. If they're I had to machine them a little bit tight. If they're tight, we'll just take a heat gun to them and slip them on. So this is kind of what I was hoping for. I'd rather it be tight than loose. And we have a solution for it. Aluminum should heat up faster. It's still cold. It's so darn cold out here. Aluminum should heat up faster than the axle, though. But I would rather these be tight than loose. Alright, I apologize. I needed two hands, but what I did is I just set it down here real quick on top of the breaker bar. Because what was happening is, I'm heating the steel and I'm heating the aluminum. The aluminum should heat up faster, but not necessarily. So, not without expanding the steel a little bit too, so it was making it a little hard. All I did was just set it down here, hit it with the torch. You gotta be careful, it's cast, so it could snap, it could break. But anyways, it slid right on with just a little bit of heat. And now I'd rather have it tight on that hub like that than loose. So that looks good. Now that rotor should just fit right on there now. Let's see if I can do this with one hand. And it should be nice and centered. And it is. So, and of course I can't hold it up there, but that will slide on there. Just doing a quick radial run out check here. And there's a little bit, obviously there's flex in the way I got this set up because it's not, I can't really mount the indicator off of the axle where it's situated, so it's going to be some fluctuation here. But I mean, the most I'm getting is 4.5 thou probably, maybe about 5. I'm just being anal at this point. 5 thousandths ain't going to break the bank. You're never going to see that or feel it. So I checked the lateral, run out about the same, 5 thousandths lateral. That's a little much for lateral, but it's not. I don't think it's going to be anything that I can feel. That could be the way the ring was machined. It could be the way the ring's sitting. I don't have this fully torqued either. I just snugged these down, so torquing that's going to flatten that even more. I think we're good here. That's way better than it was, though. So we're going to call this side good and get it bolted together. I was able to get the indicator mounted to the axle, which is a much better reference point. And laterally, we're looking at most 4 thousandths. You can see just me pushing on it, has an effect. But we're at about 0 there. And we're at about 4 max. That's totally acceptable. 3 to 4 thousandths lateral run out is fine. Radially, I measured it, same position, same mounting point, and we're at about 6 thousandths radial run out. Totally acceptable as well. I had talked to Wilwood about that, and 6 thousandths is totally fine on a radial run out. The radial is not nearly as critical as the lateral. The lateral will give you the feeling of your brakes being warped and vibration when you step on the brakes, but 4 or 5 thousandths, you're not going to notice it. So we're good. Let's get this thing bolted back together. Now, for whatever reason, this side ended up with no shims to end up even. I'm not sure what the difference is, but I've measured it a bunch of times and no shims. So what they tell you to do is if the bolt's going to stick out too far, and I don't think that it is sticking out too far, but just as precautionary, they tell you to take the shim and put it on the back side to space the bolt back so it's not so close to the rotor. So I'm just putting the 32, these measure about 32 thousandths. I'm putting 32 thousand shims on the back side to space the bolt out of the boss a little bit so it's not so close to the rotor. All right, get this side sealed up. Loctite 271, 40 foot-pounds on the bolts. The top one I could get to with the torque wrench. The bottom one went to German torque spec because I can't get to it with the torque wrench. And we're sealed up here. Pads are in, cotter key. Face the cotter key this direction. That way you can get to it. And that way it's easy to take out later. If you put it the other way, it makes it harder. And we're all sealed up over here, ready to do the other side. All right, we're all done here. So it went together like it should have. This side has a little bit more radial run out, and I have a feeling it's because the rings weren't machined perfectly centered, and they're cast, so you can't clamp them down real hard when you machine them. I was talking to my friend about that when he did them. But radial run out's not so big of a deal. The lateral run out is within 5 thou, which is totally acceptable in my book. So I think we're good here. I think the only thing that's left is to drive it, and we need to adjust the bias for the rear. These rotors are bigger than the front, so that means we're going to have to really back the bias off a lot because there's a lot of torque when the diameter's bigger. So we got to watch out for that. But other than that, you could dial it to where the rears are almost completely off, or come in much later. So I think we'll call this one good.